Hey there, friends. Dave Paulides, Canada Missing Project. That is Huck L. Berry. How you doing, Huck? He's a good girl. Yeah, she's a pretty girl. And she knows it right now because she just got all cleaned up. She's pretty. She's got her summer cut. She's excited. And yeah, it's warm too. And she knows it. That's why she's huffing a little bit. But we're all good. She's all good. And of course she's the executive producer, right? Yes, of course not. Well, right now it's about 85 degrees. We're getting some hot weather. While I was while we were up in Ocala, one of the guests was wearing a pretty cool shirt. Danny Jones is his name, and he sent me because I said, "Hey, you got a Huck shirt too, H-U-C-K." And there's his shirt. And it's a very cool shirt. Thank you very much, Danny. I'm humbled that anybody gets me anything. You're a good man. Thanks for coming to the event. We had a really good time. Really good time. Talking about heat. Article came out, CBS News, June 20th, 2026. 3 elderly hikers died in an apparent heat-related deaths while traversing the Grand Canyon's inner trails as temperatures spiked above the 100-degree mark. Pay attention, please. Rangers and emergency personnel responded to 2 separate heat-related incidents on June 12th and the 16th, according to the National Park Service. In both cases, the deceased hikers were hiking trails in the inner canyon where temperatures could exceed 109 degrees in the shade during midday hours. Emergency transponders arrived to find the hikers already deceased on the trails. A 72-year-old man was found dead on June 12th in the South Kabob Trail due to heat-related symptoms. Park officials said a 67-year-old man and a 68-year-old woman were found dead on the North Kabob Trail on June 16th. In both cases, the deceased hikers were hiking trails on the inner canyon where they exceeded 109 degrees during the day in the shade. Emergency transponders arrived and found the hikers already deceased. Sad. An investigation into the cause of death is still ongoing, although they appear to be heat-related. The hikers were transplanted to the Coconino County Medical Examiner's Office earlier this month. Another teen died in apparent heat-related causes that attempting to do a round-trip hike from the south rim of the canyon to the Colorado River. Emergency responders launched a helicopter rescue operation, ultimately found the teen in a remote area 30 feet below the trail. Please pay attention to this because this is important. And what's going on here? So when you have heat-related issues and it's really hot, 100 degrees midday in the shade, your body can't do it. It can't get your body to cool down no matter how much you drink. Now, if you're hiking in an area that's hot, you better bring a gallon jug of water. And you better be drinking every 20 minutes. And then you'll drink all your water and then there's nothing to do. Your body just cannot cool off fast enough in that heat. My recommendation, truthfully, anytime it gets over 100 degrees, you don't go out in the heat and hike, period. Yeah, sure, you can walk outside and take in the views, but you don't go hiking. It's ridiculous. Like I just saw, 3 people died in about 3 days in the Grand Canyon. Yeah. Very sad. Very sad. And even out here in Montana, it can get 100 degrees. I fished in some areas where it has been 90 degrees, and I thought I was going to die. You got to use your common sense, and you got to use your wits. All right. We've got a case today. The strangest story I've ever read regarding a missing plane and missing people. And the story is fascinating. Before I get into that, let me walk you down the line to introduce you to what happened, okay? First of all, when I was a police officer in San Jose, I was working patrol on the west side, really nice area of town. And I was working nights from 3 p.m. to 1 a.m. And it was a Saturday night, it was about 6 o'clock, I get a call from dispatch that these 2 young women in a very nice apartment complex wanted to talk to a policeman about some guy who was essentially stalking them. So they dispatched 2 officers. I get there first. Really nice apartment complex. I get there. A few minutes later, the other officer gets there. I walk up to the apartment, knock on the door, and these 2 young women greeted me. I was young too. And they were beautiful. Really, they were beautiful. And they were super smart. And they had this broken German accent. They spoke very good English, but you could tell they were German. And they said, yeah, we're in the USA for 6 months, and we're accumulating air hours to get a commercial license. And the company that we're working with, Lufthansa, sent us here to the Bay Area to get flight hours. And the reason we called you is that there's a guy in our apartment complex who makes us feel creepy, Dave, or makes us feel creepy, Dave, officer, whatever. And they're explaining that they walk to and from their car together. This guy's staring at them all the time. The women said they felt creeped out. So they said, okay, we'll go talk to this guy. So me and the officer go, and we knocked on this apartment. This guy opens. He's shocked that anyone's knocking on his door. He's probably 35. Women were in their early 20s. We started talking to this guy, and we said, hey, there's these 2 women that are very uncomfortable by you. And the more I talked to him, the more I realized the guy wasn't creepy per se, but he was a technology person, very poor social skills. I forgot where he was from the US, but he got a job in one of the technology centers in town, making big money, very smart. We ran his name through computers. He had no background of criminality or anything. We just told him, hey, leave the women alone. Stop staring at them. Don't look at them. Just leave them alone. So we went back to talk to the women. I was young. I was single. I was mesmerized by them because we talked to them about how many hours they've had, how long it take to get there, and what's their goals. And they said, well, Lufthansa is going to hire us to be pilots, and they're paying us to be here, and blah, blah. It was fascinating. No, I didn't go out with them, and no, I was very polite and personable. But that was the first time I ever heard that Lufthansa was sending people to the San Francisco Bay Area to get hours, flight hours. Now, how does that relate to this story? On January 20th, 2002, two French citizens named Lamia Baca, 25, and Morgan Fermansky, 19, were staying just outside Montreal, Canada, sent by Air France to accumulate flight hours to become a commercial pilot. I read this and I thought it reminded me of the Lufthansa ladies and how Air France was sending pilots to get hours so they could buy commercial pilots. Both of the men were from an area kind of west of Montreal, out of the suburbs of Montreal. They both had accumulated about 95 flight hours. And in order to get the next step up, they had to fly cross-country at night to get one of the checkoffs on their part of their certification. Each time you do something on a certification, you got to do something else, and there's cross-country, and then there's solo, and blah, 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 blah. Well, the plane that they were flying was a Piper Cherokee P-8 161, registered C-GBQY. It was owned by a flying service outside of Montreal, near the school where they were going to get their hours and get their certifications. The pair reserved the Piper Cherokee, and on January 19th, they flew from an airfield east of Montreal, where they had rented this plane, and they flew a flight plan from the airport to Quebec, where they landed, got more fuel, and then to continue on, they flew into Gaspé, New Brunswick, in their rented Cherokee. When they got to Gaspé, they planned to spend the night, and they did. Trip covered part of their 300 nautical mile requirement. During their time, each pilot shared time flying, navigating, etc. They used GPS to fly the coordinates. Very normal, nothing important happened. Now, if you've never been to that area in December, it gets cold. It gets very cold. And they get some really bad weather up there. But it's wintertime. The Cherokee can easily take it. But weather things happen on these trips. The next day, January 20th, the pair had filed a flight plan to leave Gaspé, fly to Quebec, onto the airport near Montreal. Well, at 11:10 hours, they flew and left Gaspé with both pilots on board. They had already contacted the FAA, Canadian Air Traffic Control, filed their flight plan, talked to weather services individuals with the government, and they said that there's a possibility that weather was questionable for a flight. Clouds were getting lower, could be trouble. They said that they were still going to try it, and if they got bad weather, they were going to turn around. Well, the pilots left. They ran into bad weather, and they decided to turn around, came back to Gaspé, and landed at 11:41 hours back in Gaspé. They landed, they called the Canadian FAA, and they spoke to the weather station people again, and they said that for the next several hours, weather would be bad, and they recommended not flying. They said that the weather had low cloud cover, didn't look good for the next several hours. So for about 4.5 hours, they just stayed in the terminal, waited for the weather to clear. They spoke to FAA several times about the weather. And eventually, they decided, after talking to local weather and Montreal weather, which they didn't do the first time, they found out that the weather frontage wasn't good. It was possible that they could fly visual flight controls on the way. They called weather at 1600 hours, only marginal, slightly better reports from Montreal weather. At 4:30 or 16:30 hours, the plane took off again in near darkness with marginal weather. Now, their licenses had already okayed them to fly the route, file the weather, and fly in darkness according to the permits that they had to fly. They got taken off at 4:30 p.m. At 4:35 p.m., there was the last communication with air traffic control 5 miles from the airport. They stated that they were on path, they were fine, and the next stop would be Quebec. And they filed a visual flight plan to land in Quebec. There was no other communication with that plane after 4:35. The flight plan covered them that the first stop would be Quebec. Well, they didn't arrive in Quebec. This is Gaspé. The route that they were going to take, this is a road that you could take if you leave Gaspé, but this is the flight path to Quebec. Now, filing a flight path like this during a normal jet would take them about an hour and 30 minutes. We're going to get into the timing of it. Well, the pilots didn't check in, and so right away they notified Search and Rescue in New Brunswick that the plane was overdue. There was nothing on radar showing the plane after 6 p.m. It was too late to start a search. The next morning, Search and Rescue was told that the plane was missing in an area en route to Quebec, and the military in Quebec started to search. And part of that setup for them is they set up a search and rescue at Charlot Airport. Captain Morissette said that they moved to the search and rescue headquarters because it was closer to the search and rescue zone. They knew the Piper had a emergency locator beacon, but it hasn't been transmitting, and they don't know why. The military is using 3 Labrador helicopters, 2 Griffins, and 2 Hercules to locate the wreckage. All local airports have been checked, and the plane hadn't landed anywhere that they knew about. They said the primary search zone was an area of Petite Cascapedia and Metapedia. They also enlisted the assistance of Industry Canada specialists to determine where 6 unusual radio signals, weak ones that were coming from the area that they were searching. Very odd, and I'd never heard of this before. If the plane had crashed, the radio signal shouldn't have worked, but the personal locator and the emergency locator beacon should have worked. Very odd. Searchers had been searching for 10 days straight since early on, and on January 31st, there was an article that stated that the hopes were fading. They said searchers are having no clue finding the plane, but military officials said that there's a lot of covered ground that's snow covered. Captain Morissette stated that a number of citizens heard a plane that night in the area of the primary search zone, and that they had been using night vision to search areas with possible heat. And he said it's so valuable that they can pick up a cigarette from 10,000 feet. And we knew the weather conditions in that area were very hard on the human body, and they were losing confidence on finding anybody. Most search and rescues average 7 days. They gave this almost 12 days. On November 1st, the Canadian Armed Forces halted the search and rescue. The 60 soldiers would leave Chargo and return to Quebec. Morissette said it's been too long and too cold, so they're calling it off. He said that the military had followed up on 75 different leads that they had. They had logged 500 flight hours covering 100,000 square kilometers. They had no sightings of the crash, no witnesses, and no idea where it went down. That is a hard one to overcome. And I'm sure there was very little coverage of French relatives coming. But they are young people. In the early evening hours on December 9th, 2002, 11 months after the Piper went missing, and 10 and a half months after the search and rescue ended, an American passenger jet was flying over Canada when they picked up an emergency transponder messages over their computer over the area where this missing Piper plane was thought to be in that area. The American jet called Canadian Emergency Services, gave them the GPS location of where the transmitter was coming from, and their FAA notified military services, and they immediately started after a search. Early that morning of December 9th, 2002, that early evening, a Canadian military helicopter flew into that GPS location of the transponder given of the emergency jet and landed into that wooded area. Unbelievably, they found the missing Piper mangled. No bodies inside in the Piper were located in the area. So let's start off. First of all, they said that there was no obvious signs of a fire. If the Piper was mangled, as they said, where are the bodies? Where are the bodies? If it's mangled that bad, they should be inside that plane somewhere. They said they didn't find any. They said that first night when they got there, they searched around that first night and didn't find anything. Now, Chris Healy is a search and rescue commander for Halifax Search and Rescue Center. Healy was baffled why the locator beacon suddenly started to function, and was asked, why did it suddenly come to life? This was his quote: "We have no idea." This is what he said: "In my experience, this is the first time the transmitter started to work on its own." That was end of quotes. He also said that there's a lot of snow in the area, and we'll send people out in the next couple days to search some more. So 11 plus months after after the plane and the transponder disappear. Now it suddenly starts working? And the batteries suddenly start working? What? From December 10th to December 12th, the military went into that area and searched, still didn't find anyone in that area. December 13th, more searchers go into that same area, and they searched and they found human body parts, bones. Said Sergeant Cameron Fredericton RCMP located pieces of clothing and human bones. RCMP sent the remnants to forensic analysis. I gotta say, this is unbelievable. So, not in the plane, even though the plane's mangled, they find these bodies, didn't find bodies, they found remnants of clothing and bones. March 28th, 2003, the coroner was able to ID some of the remains as coming from Morgan Furmansky, one of the pilots on the plane. That's all that they could find and report at that time. Now, 5 months later, on August 15, 2003, the coroner was able to ID other remains as coming from Lamia Baca, the other pilot. The NTSB issued the cause of the crash as possible icing. They said that they could find no mechanical failure in the plane. They said the plane accelerated near the end and hit into the woods at a 5% angle. No mayday call. Questions? What were the intermittent signals that search and rescue obtained from the area where the plane disappeared? And why couldn't they use those signals to find out where the location was? There was never a public statement about what technology they used to find out where those signals came from. If the plane was destroyed, as they said, there's no way anybody was able to transmit any signals from that plane, not mangled like it was. Why didn't the locator beacon activate on impact, which it's supposed to do when it crashes? Now, understand something. These are designed to activate upon impact. And I'm talking about huge impacts. That's why even big jets that crash, these still survive and tell a story and still used to transmit where they're located. The whole design about this is meant for that. The other part that's absolutely stunningly bizarre, these locator beacons don't go on and last a long time. Even on the big commercial jets, these things last maybe 2-3 weeks, maybe a month max. So why, when this happened, didn't the locator beacon go off? Now, 11 months later, the beacon goes off again, where it never went before. It obviously wasn't activated by somebody dead. Everyone already was dead, supposedly. The NTSB stated that the GPS last recorded a position just 200 miles from the crash site. Okay, pretty close. Now here's the kicker to me. The location of the crash was 130 miles from Gaspé, 170 miles from Quebec. In the area, the plane flew for 91 minutes from the time it left Gaspé. I'm going to make this as simple as I can. Stay with me. Cruise speed on a Cherokee is 145 miles per hour. 145 miles an hour times 91 minutes shows that that plane should have covered 217 miles. But according to where it crashed, it only traveled 130 miles. Now, the NTSB tracked the GPS that it offered and said it was essentially on track, and just before it crashed, it slightly swerved off angle and crashed into the forest. Where'd it go? How come it didn't account for almost 90 miles? I don't get it. Doesn't make any sense. And then you cover, so the big part of the mysteries, the transmissions that the search and rescue questioned that were coming from the area of the search. No idea where it came from. It was just talked about in one article. Number two, locator beacon not activated when the crash occurred. Number three, the distance traveled by that Cherokee doesn't make any sense. Many of you have stated in past reports similar to this. How do we even know that those are really the bodies of those two people? Could these people have traveled into a portal and disappeared? And their remains were put down months and months and months after they disappeared? I don't know. Something doesn't make sense. You will never be able to convince me that suddenly that locator beacon starts just transmitting out of nowhere. Yeah, right. Thank you for being here. You are appreciated. Take this as a data point in the future, and you're going to hear a lot more about these airplanes that have disappeared and the strangeness behind them, because I've been working on this for a long time, and we're breaking down doors in that area to document it. Nobody's ever talked about what I'm just explaining to you. Be patient. Be kindness to people. Understand that it's free to be kind to anybody, and we all have the ability to do it. Remember, missing411.com is our online store and our website. And Missing 411, National Parks, Washington State. Please watch it on Amazon. Please do. You can watch the rest of my movies at tubi.com, Missing 411, missing411.com, and Missing 411, the UFO Connection. Be safe. Paulides out.